All right, so you've been studying for several weeks now the causes leading up to the American Revolution, and so we've been doing a little bit more work with that this week and looking at some famous people and things in the American Revolution. This one's just going to discuss a little bit about the women's role in the American Revolution, and then there's another little short video that I've got attached here with it too, discussing some of the battles on the American Revolution. So let's just take a few minutes and you can watch these two videos.
During the American Revolution, many women joined the war, playing a variety of important roles. They took on responsibility as writers, messengers, camp followers, and even soldiers. Some women assisted the war from their homes, taking over family businesses, boycotting British goods, and making clothing. Others used the power of the words to motivate and encourage others to join the revolution. Abigail Adams, the wife of future President John Adams, was famous for writing letters to her husband, arguing in favor of women's rights. Mercy Otis Warren wrote pamphlets and books on revolutionary ideas, though she had to publish them under a male pseudonym. Phillis Wheatley was an African-American poet and ex-slave who wrote about slavery and women's rights, and frequently wrote letters to George Washington. Some historians believe there may have been thousands of women on the battlefield during the Revolutionary War, collecting weapons and ammunition, and assisting the troops. Deborah Sampson disguised herself as a man and joined the army, fighting in several battles and performing surgery on herself with a penknife and a sewing needle. Camp followers were women who traveled with the Continental Army during the war, helping out by cooking, setting up camp, and acting as nurses. The wives of many officers were camp followers, including Martha Washington and Molly Pitcher. Molly Pitcher was a nickname given to a woman named Mary Hayes. Mary was a camp follower who often served as a water girl, bringing water to the soldiers on the battlefield. She got her nickname when the troops would shout, "Molly, Pitcher!" when they wanted water. During the Battle of Monmouth on June 28, 1778, Molly Pitcher risked her life to bring water out to the fighting troops. When her husband was wounded in the fight, Molly took her husband's gun and fought in his place for the rest of the battle. This story became the legend of Molly Pitcher, and Molly became a symbol representing the brave women who fought in the Revolutionary War.
How about that? And then we'll skip over and watch this other one.
In the late 1700s, the relationship between Great Britain and its 13 colonies in North America began to crumble. Eventually, the colonies rebelled, and after a war that lasted 8 years, the colonies became an independent country, the United States of America. We call this war the American Revolutionary War. After the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War, which ended in 1763, Great Britain was in debt. They needed a way to make more money, and British Parliament decided to tax the North American colonists. The colonists were unhappy about this, as before they had been mostly left alone by the British government. Also, the colonists did not have any representatives in Parliament. They argued that it was unfair to impose taxes on someone without representatives to vote for or against it on their behalf. The colonists said that taxation without representation was tyranny, a cruel and unreasonable system of government. This attempt to tax the colonies was unsuccessful, but it kicked off years of hostility between the colonists and the British. In 1770, British soldiers opened fire on colonists in Boston, killing 5 men, in what came to be called the Boston Massacre. In 1773, to protest restrictions on the sale of tea in the colonies, a group of colonists dressed as Native Americans and dumped an entire shipment of tea into Boston Harbor, an event now known as the Boston Tea Party. Afterwards, British Parliament passed a group of laws designed to punish the colonists and regain control of the colonies. These laws were so harsh that they are known as the Intolerable Acts. In the fall of 1774, the First Continental Congress met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Representatives from almost every colony asked King George III to stop the Intolerable Acts, but they were ignored. By April 19, 1775, the first shots were fired in small battles at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. The Revolutionary War had begun. When the colonists realized that there was going to be a war, the Continental Congress met for the second time and appointed George Washington to be the commander of the Continental Army. The first major battle of the war was called the Battle of Bunker Hill. The British had taken control of Boston, and they wanted to occupy more territory. Thousands of American militiamen gathered to fight the British soldiers, also known as the Redcoats, for the red coats of their uniforms. Although the British eventually won the battle, so many of their soldiers were killed or injured that they realized defeating the colonists would be a very difficult task. Not long after this battle, the Second Continental Congress sent another letter to King George III, called the Olive Branch Petition. The colonists wanted to make peace. They hoped that they could remain British subjects, but have their rights recognized. King George refused even to read the letter, and instead declared the colonists traitors in a state of open rebellion against the British Empire. After this, the colonists became angry with King George. They realized that he did not care about them. They decided to announce that the colonies were an independent country, free of British rule and in charge of their own government. Thomas Jefferson, along with Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman, wrote a document to explain why they were doing this. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted this document, called the Declaration of Independence. In the months that followed, the war went badly for the Americans. British forces won several important victories and captured thousands of American troops. As winter set in, the small American forces were losing hope. Something had to be done. On December 25, 1776, George Washington took his men across the icy Delaware River into New Jersey and launched a sneak attack that resulted in the capture of nearly 1,000 enemy soldiers. This dramatic victory at the Battle of Trenton inspired the American forces to fight hard again. 1777 brought more successes for the Americans. The first major American victory of the war took place in the fall when the Americans defeated the British in the Battle of Saratoga. In a second battle a few days later, British forces surrendered. France had been helping the Americans secretly against its longtime rival, Great Britain, but these victories convinced the French to show their support openly. France recognized the United States as an independent country and formed an alliance, sending money, material, and soldiers that would be needed to win the war. This did not signal the end of the hardships for the American forces, however. That winter they camped at Valley Forge, where they suffered from cold and hunger. Many of the soldiers did not even have shoes to wear, and protected their feet from the snow by wrapping them with rags. This could have been the end of the revolution, but the troops endured until more supplies arrived, and they were able to prepare to fight again. The last great battle of the Revolutionary War took place around Yorktown, Virginia. British forces under General Cornwallis were camped there, waiting for British ships to come with supplies and reinforcements, but the French Navy stopped them from making it through. General Washington, with combined French and American troops, surrounded the city, cutting off any chance of retreat for the British. For 11 days, the Americans attacked the city with cannon fire day and night. When the British realized that no help was coming, they surrendered to George Washington on October 19, 1781. This undeniable victory was the beginning of the end for the war in the United States. Over the next year, British troops withdrew, and on September 3, 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed. This treaty negotiated peace between Great Britain and the United States, officially ended the war, and recognized the United States of America as a new, independent nation. The Revolutionary War was long and bloody, but it marked a turning point in history. Today, the day the colonies declared their independence is celebrated in the United States on the 4th of July as Independence Day. I hope you enjoyed learning about the American Revolutionary War today. Goodbye till next time.